Hi, everyone. Welcome. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. My name is Alison, and I'm the Senior Technical Program Manager on the Production Platform Group at Deliveroo. So hopefully some of you in the audience have heard of us, but for those of you perhaps stateside, your reference would be Uber Eats, DoorDash, that food marketplace model. Deliveroo are a London-based company operating in over 200 cities across 13 markets worldwide. And our job is to help our millions of customers find that food they've been dreaming about all day on our platform, and to give our restaurants, our riders, and our customers an amazing experience whilst they're on our site. And we also have the challenge of matching our orders with the right riders in milliseconds. But we're just getting started. We want to be the definitive food company. Whenever you think of food, whenever you get that hunger pang, you think Deliveroo. So, why am I here today? I'm here today to talk about, from the minute that your startup is born, that journey you go on to becoming a fully fledged, grown-up adult company. And I want to zoom on in and talk about those growth years, the awkward teenage years, where you have some maturity in your product and your processes, but you're still developing in other areas. Now, the growth years, they're exciting. You've got lots of VCs wanting to invest money in you. You're like breaking new records every week. But it can also add complexity too. You have more and more people joining your org. You're building more and more services. In this more complex world, how do you build consensus in your engineering org? How do you upskill people? And how do you make sure everyone's pointing and moving in the same direction? So this will be a very familiar picture to a lot of you in the room. This is where we started. We have a monolith. We have a small group of people. They once even fitted in a single room, then a small building, and so on from there. And in this world, it's easier to build consensus, and it's easier to make sure everyone's pointing in the same direction. Someone's like, hey, I've got an idea. What if we do X? Everyone high fives, and they ride off into the sunset every night. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but you get the point. Then, over time, in what feels like a lifetime some days and other days a blink of an eye, you get somewhere like here. Now, we have over 300 people in our tech org across data science, product, engineering, and experience, and we have hundreds of production services. So we've kind of outgrown fitting in a whole slide. So to show you our scale, this is our production load on our main AWS account. And what we want to talk about today is how we got in that journey from the first slide to this slide. And we're going to focus in on 3 areas: onboarding, learning, and tooling and frameworking. So let's start with lesson 1, onboarding. A while ago, I think about a year ago, but I kind of lose track of time at Deliveroo. I always say it's like dog years. So I'm just going to say a while ago, we had a problem statement that we wanted to double the size of our tech org. But if we go back here, this is a really busy world. People are on call. People are building the product out. They're interviewing people coming into your tech org. So if we want to double the tech org, how do we do that without really putting too much pressure on the teams already existing, but at the same time give an amazing experience to the people joining us? So we had a think and we said, okay, what if every second week at Deliveroo is an onboarding week? So new joiners can only join us on an onboarding week. Now, with everything, you have to be pragmatic. There will always be exceptions, like visa requirements that mean that sometimes that's not the case. But for 99% of people, they join us on an onboarding week. And we said, okay, in this onboarding week, we want people to do sessions with us that are going to mean they can land successfully into their teams. So we asked for volunteers across data science, engineering, product to create these introductory packs. What would it be good to know about your area at the end of a first week at Deliveroo? Now, even our CTO and our senior leadership team run an onboarding session every 2 weeks. No one's exempt. And the reason for that is you don't want to pull too much on one group of people. You want to share the load. So, oh, that's very bright. Sorry to anyone in the front row. As you can see on the Monday, I thought I'd be closer, but you can just imagine me pointing. On the Monday, you start with an introduction to the company. What's our history, our vision and mission for Deliveroo? And you get a few practical things like you get your laptop, you get the introduction to the HR policies, and of course the very important office tour. Who can be successful when they don't know where the coffee machine is? Then on Tuesday, you do our introduction to the tech org. Who are we? How are we structured? As the week goes on, you get the more granular level of detail. On Friday, we have a retrospective where we ask our new joiners, what sessions did you enjoy? What did you get out of it? What can we improve? And then we look to action those improvements for the next lot of onboarders joining. On Friday afternoons, we end by grabbing a drink of our choice, heading to the Roo pitch, and we do the Q&A and demos of all the awesome stuff we've built over the last 2 weeks. Now, there was a few lessons that we learned in doing this. One, if we go back, this is quite a lot of information in your first week to take in, but by putting it in a logical order, starting with company, then tech org, then working your way to the granular level of detail, it kind of told a logical story that was easier for the new joiners to follow. The other thing is you can see that we have a mixture of cultural and practical sessions. So on Wednesday in the afternoon, you learn how we give feedback at Deliveroo, as well as learning things like, how do we do feature flagging at Deliveroo? This mixture means that when people start in their teams the next week, they not only know how we do things, what we do, but why we do them. Now, before I move on to the learning section, there was one particular thing that happened this year. It was very exciting. We had our first year of grad cohort joining us. This is something that we want to do every September. But I was talking to a grad earlier this year who joined another company. And first day, you get your laptop, you open up your calendar, and she saw these startups, kind of stand-ups in her calendar. So she went along to the stand-up and she said, I didn't know whether to sit down, stand up, or what was expected of me to say. And if you take a step back and think about it, why on earth, if you've never worked in a tech org before, would you have an idea what a stand-up is? So a really group of awesome people at Deliveroo, Sally, Abdul, Jack, and Emily, they thought about this problem. And we broke our own rules, so we had the grads join us a week before. And we did a special kind of curriculum, like a pre-boarding for them, where we talked to them about agile ceremonies, what they are. We talked to them about how you do code reviews, what a good code review looks like, as well as practical sessions like an introduction to networking, storage, and EC2 on AWS. So the thing to take away back to your organizations, if you're kind of starting on this journey, is what do you want people to know about your company in their first week? What would make them land successfully in their teams? And the other thing is, who's joining your organization? Do you have to make any special adaptations to that group of people? So, you've onboarded at Deliveroo. In fact, maybe you've been here for a while. How do we make sure that Team X isn't trying to solve the same problem as Team Y? How do we upskill people? So we knew that we wanted to build a learning culture at Deliveroo, but who doesn't? What does that even mean? So for us, it meant that we wanted everyone to be able to learn from everyone. And that meant creating everyday learning opportunities and experiences in the meetings and the rituals that we already had. So this year, this was actually a problem that we only solved this year. And we used to have this old process. So whenever you wanted to design a new system or rebuild a system, you'd go on to this repo called RFC, Request for Comments, and there'd be a template there, and you'd fill it out. Now, there was two problems with this. One, the template was a bit out of date. It didn't really ask you the questions that we needed to answer when designing your service for the scale that we were now at. There was updated security guidance that we would now want you to think about. And the second thing is you kind of had to know that this repo existed and like be watching it all the time to see if a new design had been put into it. So it wasn't very inclusive, or it wasn't a great learning opportunity for everyone. So a group of us got together and we had to think about code reviews and how they were a really good example of everyday learning. If I'm the reviewer of code, I might have a look at it and go, oh, I didn't know I could do it like that. That's really interesting. I've learned something today. Or if I'm the person who's requested the code review, someone might come over to me and say, oh, by the way, I've learned through experience that doing it like this doesn't really work. You might want to think about X. So we thought, how can we make this work for design? So we came up with the Eng Design peer process, like pull requests, but for design. The first thing, sorry, it's so bright, just blinding you all. The first thing that we did was update our design doc. So you can see on the kind of column there, it's got things like performance, scalability, cost. Now, this doesn't just give you those headings. Embedded in this doc is reference material that will help you understand what we mean by this. It gives you real-life examples of what good looks like. But still, if it's your first time ever doing something like this, it can be quite intimidating to do. And even if you're an experienced engineer, it's always good to get like someone ratify your thoughts and your design. So in the doc, it says, hey, you're not alone in doing this. You can come along, you can click the link, come along to a Slack group that's called Eng Design Peers. And what we'll do is we'll pair you with someone that's got experience in the area that you're trying to design for. And this isn't about approval at all. This is genuinely about getting experience and feedback from someone that's been there, done it, got the battle scars on the t-shirt to prove it, and building that experience into your design. Now, like the curriculum, we gather feedback. So every month we send out an anonymous Google form to anyone that's been through this process. And we gather about once every 6 weeks as an Eng Design peer group to work out, you know, is this working? What's the feedback been? What can we change to make it better? Now, I think this is probably one of the most proudest things that or the thing that I'm proudest of being at Deliveroo, because not only have we created this like regular kind of learning experience, we're building better products because of it, more secure, more scalable, more cost-efficient products, just by learning from each other's experience. So you can now design a service. What about another problem? And it's actually not a problem statement. It's more of a good thing. You're going to have lots of different people with different experience join your organizations. Some of them might never have used a cloud provider before. Some of them might have used Azure, Google Cloud Platform. Now, of course, being at reInvent, we are loyal AWS customers. So how do we onboard people onto our AWS platform? So there's a few things that we do. One is that we, of course, have an onboarding session. So the production platform group, we run an onboarding session that gives you an introduction to our tooling and a bit about Terraform and how you launch onto the production platform. The other thing is we have an internal doc site. It's basically a Gitbook, which was really important because it's already part of the engineer workflow. You can put PRs in to keep the docs up to date. Now, on our internal doc site, the production platform group have created lots of documentation for lots of different levels. So kind of start with the step-by-step guide on how to launch your first app onto the platform. And then it kind of gets the more kind of interesting, kind of deeper problems of how to use auto-scaling groups and that kind of thing. So you have to make sure that you kind of cover kind of a lot of different scenarios. And then when people want to know more information, they can come to our platform Slack group and ask further clarifications from the docs. But then there's the fun thing. So what if you want to join the platform group? Or what if you want to know, like you're about to go on call and you want to learn how to problem solve on the platform? This is where you can have some real fun. So we've run game days, I think a few times now. And There's lots of material on the internet, GitHub repos you can use for scenarios for game days. The one that we run is an all-day event, and we take about 10, 15 people, and we mix them up. So each team will have experienced people, and then people that are kind of like new to it. And what you do is there's a scenario. So the scenario is that this is your first day at the company. You're a completely brand new team. The old team, they've all been fired. And of course, there's no documentation to help you. And the challenge that you have is that the CEO, she's not very happy. There's lots of problems. Customers aren't happy. You've got to problem solve in your team how to keep the production platform up. What are these random spikes in traffic, which, to your knowledge, you don't know? Someone's in the next room chaos monkeying the environment. So you've got to figure out how to build the most cost-efficient platform and solve the problems that the chaos monkey is shoving into the environment. Now you can gamify this, so you can have like the most cost-efficient architecture wins, or you can just use it as a learning experience. For us, we've had really good feedback around this, just as it's a bit of fun, but it's a really great learning opportunity to get to know the platform at a bit of a deeper level. So, wouldn't it be nice if you just designed a service, you launched it out into the world of production, and then you could just then saunter off to conferences and talk about your new shiny service. You could tweet about it and blog about it. But I'm betting here there's been a lot of people that have been responsible for a production outage in real life. So, things go wrong. We're humans. That's part of what happens. We're never always going to have like a perfect world. Sometimes things happen that are completely out of our control. So how did we make this a learning experience? Before I talk about how we made it a learning experience, I'm going to share something that was a bit of a disaster for us. We kept having the same incident again and again and again, and we were getting really mad. We were doing our postmortems. We were doing our repair items. Why on earth was this happening to us? And so we had a think, and we thought, okay, well, if we're clearly not doing the right repair items. We're clearly not getting our root cause right. So how do we address that? So what we did is, this is our postmortem template. We introduced the 5 whys into our postmortem template. And what this does, if you've never heard of it before, it goes a little something like this. You start with a problem statement. I was driving home from work one day and my car broke down. Why did my car break down? I ran out of petrol. Why did I run out of petrol? I forgot to go to the petrol filling station. And you keep going until you get to that very bottom why. And that's important because that is your true root cause. That is what you want to be building your repair items against. And I'm pleased to say, ever since introducing the 5 whys into our template, we've never had the same incident happen on the same service. But how do we make sure that that same incident doesn't happen on other services? So every Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the exact same room, same day, same time every week, we have our live service health review. It's a meeting in which we look at how how's the platform ran over the last 7 days? How healthy are our systems looking? So if you've written a postmortem that week, you'll come along to live service health review and you'll present your postmortem. You'll talk about the 5 whys and the impact it had and how what are the repair items that are gonna make sure that this never happens to us again. And the reason for doing that is so that people walk out of that room going, that was really interesting, that incident. Could that happen to us? We should investigate. There's one final point on postmortems. We really believe, and I think it's really important, that they're blameless. Like I said, we're all going to make mistakes. It's human error. But we don't need to ever point that out. Postmortems are a learning experience, not a blame one. And the way that we handle that at Deliveroo is that we never have names in our postmortems. So when it comes to root cause, it'll never be Alison did this. It'll just simply be that this happened. Same with the on-call engineers. We never name them by name, just by role. So it'll be restaurant engineer on call did action X. And that way, they can be blameless, a really nice learning experience. And now we finally feel like we've cracked it with the 5 whys and making sure it never happens again. So the thing to take away from that section, what are the learning opportunities that you have every day in your org? How do you make sure that you're teaching and making learning opportunities for everyone? So finally, there's frameworks and tooling. Now, the first one that I wanted to talk about is actually a tool that on this very stage last year, one of my colleagues came and introduced to the world. It's called Hopper, named after the very wonderful Grace Hopper. Now, Hopper when it was introduced, it was 1 year old. And Hopper is our release management tool, or at least that's what it was born as. And in the context of today, it's kind of evolved over the time. And at Deliveroo, you never only have one job. You kind of accumulate them as you go. And Hopper's accumulated the second job of being our service catalog. And why is that important about what I'm talking about today? Well, you can imagine when there's hundreds of engineers, you don't really know everyone. You don't know what everyone else is working on and who everyone is or who to speak to when something isn't quite right. So you can imagine the scenario where you're looking through your logs and you see an error, a service is sending you an error. And you're like, oh, I didn't know this service. I'm going to go to Hopper, look up the service, and I'm going to find out who owns it. So you can see that we have links to people's Slack groups. So that's the team that own it, their Slack group. You can go and chat to them and say, hey, your service is telling me an error. Can you sit and debug with me? Also links to playbooks, GitHub repos, so you can go and read the README and figure it out. And we've introduced tier services, tiering into Hopper as well, which is important for on-call because if you look and you see it's only a tier 3 service, you might have a different response to if it was a tier 0 or a tier 1 service. So that's just a little update on what Hopper is doing today. We talked a little bit about when things go wrong. I want to talk a little bit more about that. One of the first actual frameworks we created as an engineering org was our incident management framework. It's so important that when things do go wrong, that everyone knows what's expected of them, what their role is to play in this. So, again, we have an onboarding session that introduces you to how we manage incidents at Deliveroo. We also, so you'll do that, and then if you're a back-end engineer, a product manager, or an engineering manager, you'll be recalled after your 3 months at Deliveroo for further on-call training. So we have 3 on-call roles at Deliveroo. We got primarily back-end engineer on call, engineer manager on call, and comms on call. The engineer on call will be the first to receive an alert. And they'll use their dashboards and their playbooks to decide, is this just a warning alert that I need to take action on, but it's not actually an incident? Or are we actually in an incident? If they decide on the second scenario, they'll use our handy incident Slack bot to page in the engineering manager on call. The engineering manager on call is there as a support role. They'll open a dedicated Slack incident channel. They'll page in comms on call. And they'll keep comms on call up to date on what's happening, what's the impact to customers, riders, restaurants. And then comms on call, they'll come in. They're made up of our product manager community. They'll be the one that do the comms to the rest of the business, to ops, to account managers, and let them know what's going on, what's happening, and keep them up to date. So from that single alert, we have a timely cascade of events that takes place. All from that first alert that triggers. Now, the engineer on call, they're our incident commander. They're the one heads down, making deciding on what action to take to restore service as quickly but as safely as possible. Then, when it all wraps up, they'll be the one that lead and carry out the post-mortem process. So as I say, it's really important that people know what they're doing when things go wrong. But what about in good times? Or what about thinking about your career at Deliveroo and how you're going to grow at Deliveroo and how you're going to learn? This year, we introduced version 2 of our levels and expectations framework. So this started earlier this year. We had an offsite. So we took an engineer from every level and every discipline, so back-end, front-end, mobile, and we did an offsite. And in that offsite, we talked about the kind of work that we all wanted to be recognized and rewarded for. So there was the obvious, the product work, how are we impacting the business? the reliability, the scalability, on-call work, but also the glue work. If you've never heard the term glue work, it's that kind of work that makes a team feel like a team that often does go unrecognized. That person that always volunteers to run your retros, that person that always puts the demos together and the slides for whatever like sprint ceremonies that you have. So the engineer managers and the directors, they took all this feedback from that offsite and they created version 2 of the levels and expectation framework. This is the framework that says for every level of engineer delivery we have, what are the expectations of you when it comes to technical execution, collaboration and leadership, and then team building as well. So you can see what level you are, why you're that level, and then how do you get to the next level? What would you need to do to be able to show that you're ready for promotion? And the document doesn't just tell you what's expected. There's also a real kind of life examples document that goes hand in hand with this, that kind of talks you through real actual examples of work that have happened to Deliveroo that represent each of those levels. This basically means that everyone Deliveroo knows how they can move up and makes it really easy for them to have one-to-ones with their manager and plan their career progress at Deliveroo. So this is basically a snippet of some of the stuff that we've learned from our time so far. Obviously, our next leg of our journey is the awkward teenager, is the rest of that progression to fully fledged adult company. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more lessons to learn along the way. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this talk is I feel like as I was talking to people about these things, everyone had the same things on their mind. And I feel like we could do a lot better in industry about learning from each other and what's worked at companies. So I'd be very excited to talk to some of you and hear about what's working at your companies and the kind of lessons that you've learned too. But for now, I'm very happy to take any questions.
How do you deal with as the company scales up? You're going to start off with this very small team. You're going to end up with people who are in critical paths and things like that, those people who know everything. How do you deal with those people when they leave, and you've got new joiners who are then picking up the reins?
So if you didn't hear the question, it was about, obviously you have, as a company grows, some people love working at a startup and a smaller startup, so they leave and it creates this kind of sometimes a knowledge vacuum. It has been an issue, but trying to really encourage as much documentation. We do tech talks a lot where we record them and store them like precious artifacts for like knowledge sharing. But we also just try to embed people in different teams as well. So the knowledge moves around. It is quite a hard problem, but I think by trying to just make sure people do documentation, even a good README or good readable code should be a really good way of people being able to come into teams and pick that up. Sometimes I feel like as well that when other people leave, you've actually got people that step up into those roles as well, and that can be quite nice for people to get that opportunity. So it's not always a bad thing.
As the organization evolves, obviously the roles that are available within the organization evolve. How do you handle fluidity in talent and roles as people want to evolve their career, not just vertically, but also laterally within that rapidly changing environment?
It's a really good question. So for nearly 2 years, I was Deliveroo's only program manager. And I was just, I was hired because there was a problem where they wanted someone to build an incident management framework. And then my role is just I feel like at Deliveroo, we've just allowed flexibility, allow the role to evolve, and we'll kind of deal with the kind of where that fits in the org later. So I think we have just allowed people to come in, and we allow people to move into. We don't see if you want to become an engineer manager, for example. That's not necessarily a promotion. It's just you're able to go into a different path. We've actually had people move into the engineering manager path. They've done it for a while, but maybe they actually want to go back to being an individual contributor again. So we've had that just allow people and be flexible with people. The most important thing is that we solve the problems that we have to solve, and we'll kind of support that as it goes. one of the most important things was early on having a HR business partner that worked with the tech org, because she was really helpful in creating those roles in the background and making sure that we helped develop that person and that we allowed for that flexibility. But I do think you just have to kind of go with the flow, and the most important thing is having those people there that can solve the problems that you have. And I feel like you can work out titles and stuff as you go, and often those kind of people that come in and do that will be able to forge their own careers as well, and push for that kind of change to happen as well. And definitely like the number one example of that. So now we have 3 program managers that deliver, and we've kind of evolved that team as we've gone on.
Hi. So the onboarding and the learning schedules is great. It sounds good. I think it is a good way to kind of share and scale your team. Engineers hate meetings. They hate scheduled meetings more than anything else. And by the looks of that weekly schedule or bi-weekly schedule, it looks like quite a lot of meetings. How much, realistically speaking, if you're a growing team, if you're 20, 25, how much of this is realistically doable, or do you need dedicated program managers, engineering managers to essentially set up the foundation and then kind of have to suck up perhaps 25% or 50% of your engineers' weekly time off coding and into learning and onboarding?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So someone took over this full time, like creating and enriching the curriculum. So Sally, she was an engineering manager. She moved into that role, and she's really enriched it and added like a grad and software apprentice programs to it. So that was a really important move of really realizing that this week was really important and it needed that someone thinking about it and caring and nurturing it. So we have rotas. So if you're already an engineer in our org, you might be on a rota that means you deliver one of these talks once every 4 times, or depending on how big your team is. So you share the load. If you're a new person joining, so you're a new engineer, that's your first week, I think the point is that, hopefully the point is that they're all relevant to you. They all will help you in your second week understand the business better, be able to know how we do code reviews, and be able to be embedded into your team a lot faster. So not everyone attends all of these meetings every week. So if you're already a member of our organization, you'll be on a rota to give one of the talks, but not every second week. It'll be less than that. And if you're a volunteer on the schedule, you'll only ever deliver 1 talk. So you won't be like doing multiple talks in the same week. Again, because going back to when I talked at first, we were very aware that people are already really time constrained, and you want them to be able to have the time and the thought to write code. So the rota-based system means that each team will be responsible only for 1 talk, and they'll be on a rota to deliver that talk.
Thank you.
Hi. So I think it's really clear from this that there's a really strong investment in the people at Deliveroo, which is amazing. Something I'd like to hear a bit more about is the bottom point on your slide here, providing real life examples of areas which demonstrate what these mean. How real life are these? Not in terms of, I don't expect you to have made them up, but rather like, is it by looking directly at employees and saying this person acted appropriately for their grade? And a second question, around your on-call. You've got 3 people on an on-call rota. At 3 a.m. when something goes wrong, do all of them get woken up?
So I did make that very clear, and that's a very good live feedback for next time. So on those three people we have on call, so engineers on call, comms on call, and engineer managers on call, it's again a rota-based system. So for engineers, we actually have 10 different rotas. So if you think like restaurants on call, rider on call, consumer on call, growth on call, etc. And again, those rotas, we kind of have in an ideal world, there'd be a minimum of 6 people on each rota and a maximum of 11. I think in a fast-growing company, if you're on call any less than like once a quarter, like the whole world's changed by the next time you're on call. So 6 to 11 people on each individual rota means that you kind of help, because sustainability is really important. And, you know, like we want to really avoid burnout. It's a real thing, and we should. It has to be really aware of it, especially in the tech industry. So by creating that rota-based system again and making sure those rotas are really nice sizes, and we have an on-call engineering huddle once a month where all the on-call engineers come and they give feedback about how sustainable does their rota feel. Do we need to maybe move people between rotas where our rota's a little bit smaller? And we do that, kind of really listen to the feedback. On the first question about the real life examples on the levels and expectation framework, so we used actual people that had been promoted in the last few cycles and what they'd done. Some of it is like where they've been a really amazing mentor, or like, you know, if you're doing a lot of mentoring of like and leveling people up, that's a really good example of like team building and leadership that you would be recognized for. And then there's things like, you know, leading a really high impactful project that you delivered in a really like cost efficient or scalable way. So all of these things kind of get looked at. We also have individual contributors in our calibration meetings. So when we're talking about promotion cycles, there's individual contributors in that room kind of able to feed in, give feedback on what they've seen people do as well. And that's a very new process for us. So we're still learning through that one. And the good news is that people have really already started adding to the example. So engineering managers are saying, oh, well, I've seen my engineers do X, so I think this is a good example. If you think about platform work, it can be quite different from product engineering work. So we've kind of enriched and added some platform examples to that sheet as well to help and guide engineering managers as promotion cycles come up.
So about the service catalog tool that you've shown, is it open source? What's the name again? And is it like okay, so it's Hopper. Okay. Is it like a service discovery kind, or do I need manually inputting information?
So when you create your app in Terraform, it will ask you to like, that's where you capture that information in Terraform, and then that's what then will like show this information. We could do more around it, but it's just like, I like the automation part, but it's more about like the time, like commitment to doing that versus like other things. So like cost of opportunity.
Okay.
Since we're at AWS, a question around cost. As your team grows, I guess a lot of companies give freedom to their developers in a dev environment or their own personal environment for them to feel free to experiment on AWS. What is your advice or strategy into making sure that you're not spending more money on engineering AWS accounts than on your production account?
Yeah, so we do have a sandbox account, and then our test account, and then production. You can set up billing alerts. So having someone that cares about billing is probably like the number one thing. So at Deliveroo, I always so I get the alerts. I monitor the accounts and usage. Also, we have our account managers behind us as well. So we can give them a wave. So like that's another way as well, where account managers will be given feedback on account, and we have a monthly business review where we review our AWS spendage. Is it going up? And maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe there's a genuine reason for going up, but actually just understanding that and monitoring it and looking at your trends. So definitely have just at least one person that's keeping an eye on things and setting up these alerts so you can get emails and different ways to alert on when the billing goes over what threshold you expected it to.
So we have a real problem with overlapping Slack channels and channel fatigue. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because you've mentioned a couple different like cases where you create a new channel.
So for incidents, all alerts start their life in our on-call triage channel, just one Slack channel. And the on-call engineer will sort of just have a little conversation with themselves, like, hey, I got this alert, I'm gonna just look at my playbooks. It's only when we declare an incident that we'll then open a separate incident Slack channel. and that will have the same number as our postmortem. So when you open an incident Slack channel using the incident bot, it will then create you a postmortem template automatically into the channel. That's why we have that kind of separateness. Also, sometimes there's multiple incidents going on at once, so being able to have those separate incident channel can help. Hopefully that doesn't happen too much. We all on-call rota, so talk to like restaurants on call, consumer on call. They all have their own on-call channels, but they're only allowed to like discuss like swapping chefs and that kind of thing in those channels. The on-call triage one is where we go when we know an alert's fired, something's wrong, and we'll start our process from there. Slack is just one of those things that it's like out of control how many channels. There's like a channel for dogs. If you want to like look at cat pictures, there's a channel for that. So you kind of have to know where to go when you first join. But the way that we helped people with this is that every team has a team working agreement. So when you join a team, you'll see the team working agreement. It's like, hey, this is the channels that are really important to our team to be like this is our dev channel and our on-call channel and that kind of thing. And every time we keep those documents up to date in our retro. So whenever we have like a team retro, then you'll look at your team working agreement. Is it up to date? Do we still really believe in this doc? So that's one of the ways that we manage that. But for incidents, they all start in one channel and go from there. But yeah, if anyone finds the solution to managing Slack, I feel like they would make a lot of money from that. Thank you very much. I think that we're out of time. Yeah.